Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is Mike Yost, President of MESA International, and I want to welcome you to our webinar here today. This is a webinar for the celebration of the 2017 Smart Story Awards. This is a program that we started last year, so this is our second annual contest. And we had a total of 30 entrants, 12 media sponsors, and a ton of great tips and examples on how to prove value in using smart manufacturing solutions. The stories are available still for download at www.smartstoryawards.com. And I would like to say that the focus on this from a MESA perspective is to celebrate the people and solutions that are driving manufacturing. And as the technologies continue to evolve and strengthen and get more and more powerful and capable, I think that this process here of sharing our understanding of value and pain points and all the experiences that everybody has is really as important as anything else we face in industry. So truly appreciate how everybody has come together to put their stories forward, to share their stories. And again, we're here, excuse me, to celebrate the fact that you as the community have chosen the 3 winners that are going to be represented here today. So we could change the slide quickly. Just want to step us through how you can participate here today using the control panel. So on the webinar control panel, you'll see an orange arrow that you can use to open and close your panel. You'll also see a questions box that is listed there. So please feel free throughout the course of the session today to put your questions into that box, and our presenters and our moderators will respond to the questions that you submit. And this presentation is being recorded, and it will be posted along with the slides into the MESA resource library within 1 week, available to all of our premium members. So next slide, please. So for anyone unfamiliar with how the program works, we had 30 entrants submit smart stories this year, and then based on the number of downloads from the community, we have our 3 winners here today. So you'll see Piero Orlando from Siemens. He's the digital enterprise thought leader for aerospace and defense. His submission received the most downloads, followed by Mike James, who's the chairman of the board at ATS, and Scott Daugherty, who's the senior vice president of business development at Cormetech. So over the next hour, Mr. John Clemens, who is the brains behind this program to begin with, and oversees its execution. He will be engaging with our presenters and having everybody tell their story and drive us through a Q&A session. So I would again encourage everybody to submit questions into the question box, and I will turn it over to John and ask John to come in and introduce our panelists. John?
Excellent, thank you, Mike. So our first story here is from Piero Orlando, and he's with Siemens. He's the digital enterprise thought leader for aerospace and defense. And the story that he's going to be telling us about today is about a manufacturing company that produces aerospace engines. They were using an ERP-based MES system and decided to migrate to a PLM-centric MES. And the thing that I find most interesting about this story is having to deal with 17 geographically dispersed plants as part of the total solution. So Piero, I'd like to turn it over to you, and we'd like to hear your story.
Oh, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike. Yes, the story is actually pretty simple. The company we were faced was actually a company that started in defining the complete engineering of the engine directly into the ERP. because it was simple, because the ERP was already there, because actually the ERP was SAP. The SAP was already there. They already had people skilled in SAP, and then decide to actually define the complete bill of process, basically the list of operations that has to be executed directly into ERP, and then to send the information from ERP to MES in order to make this operation executed at the shop floor. And then they face the problem in having some part of the engineering which cannot be defined in the ERP. And then they had a different system and basically merge information from SAP and to this external system in order to have something consistent into the MES. Finally, they decide to introduce the PLM and to move a complete set of engineering information from SAP to the PLM in order to have a consistent system which is able to basically store all information which has been which will be altered in the PLM and then finally sent to the MES. In order to measure how good is the solution, basically they identify some KPIs, which is something very new, which is the new product introduction and new product development, which is actually measuring how good is the engineering. So which is how we can be fast in translating the information from the engineering to something which is actually executable at the shop floor. The second KPI was the right first time. So how good are the information at the shop floor so that the operator is able to execute the operation without adding errors, without asking information to the engineering, and without generating error and generating reward. And the other KPI important is actually the number of escalation which is sent to engineering, which is basically measuring from a certain number of defects they found at the shop floor, which are the number of defects which is due to the fact that the engineering information are not available. Maybe not because the engineering is wrong, but because the information is not available in paper, for example. So these three KPIs was actually the measuring of how the solution is good. I think that's all for this summary.
All right. Thank you, Piero. We appreciate that. So then going on to our next presenter, we have Mike James. He is the chairman of the board for ATS. And this is a story about the MES system, manufacturing execution system, that ATS helped develop for Carlsberg Brewery. And the thing that to me is impressive about this story is that for anybody that's familiar with brewery operations knows that is kind of what I call deceptively simple. It looks simple, but in reality, it's far more complicated than it looks. And so making that especially challenging. So I'd like to turn it over to Mike, and let's hear your story, Mike. Did we lose Mike?
It looks like he's just muted. Mike, would you mind unmuting yourself?
I'm good. Let's. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Mike, go ahead. Let's hear your story.
Let's get started again. So from aero engines to beer. This project started really from a best practice and continuous improvement project that Carlsberg already had running, and they invited us to join as a consultant to bring the different breweries together. It was basically all of the breweries in Europe. So we were talking about a total at the time of 17 breweries. The team understood after a while that it was very hard for them to measure the performance. They didn't have a consistent way of measuring the performance in the different breweries. They were therefore struggling with, who had the best practices, which of the best practices should be adopted across all the breweries. And as this idea developed and went further, the project became larger, and all the elements of the process. And as you mentioned, John, it can get very complicated when we're taking the orders into the ERP. We're trying to manage the detailed scheduling. We've got the physical controls layer, which was different in every brewery. So how do we move forward with this? And slowly but surely, this project turned into a manufacturing execution systems project, which would really embed the MES into the position that it would connect all of these different solutions together. The result was that we were able to build on the best practices, but also move into an area of great importance, which was the scheduling and the response to the demand cycle that was going on in the market. Anybody who's familiar with this market, it's very variable. It can change very quickly. If the sun is shining, if it's warm, more beer gets drunk. If a football match is won in a particular city, more beer gets drunk there, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's hard for these companies to keep up with the changing demand that's taking place all the time. So eventually, moving from best practices into a demand-based system, which really allowed the business to improve its response to changes in demand. And I'll leave the rest of the story, I think, to a little bit more detail as we go into the next section. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. So let's advance a couple of slides, and let's get to our third presenter. And this is going to be Scott Daugherty, and he's the Senior VP of Business Development at Cormetech. And this story that he tells to me is also very interesting because of all the financial tools that were used to calculate ROI and payback. This is one of the things that everybody's keen on, is what is the real ROI, and this is a project here that had that in the forefront from the beginning. So Scott, let's hear your story.
Scott, we are not hearing you if you're muted.
Megan, my microphone is still open.
Scott, are you able to unmute your phone? So John, maybe we should jump into Q&A with the other guys while we work on Scott's issue.
All right, that's fine. Our apologies. We're not sure what happened to Scott here, but let's just jump into some questions. So again, everybody that is on the webinar here, please put your questions into your question box on your webinar, and I promise you we will get to as many as we possibly can in the time that we've got. All right, so yeah, there's a slide. Put your questions into the question box, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. But I've got a couple here that I wanted to start out with. The one thing, as I just mentioned, is that everybody's keen on is what is the payback? What's the ROI on these kind of projects? So I'd like to ask each of our presenters here, and we'll start, Piero, with you, is tell us what kind of ROI the solution actually provided and how did it achieve that ROI? So Piero, you're first.
Okay, now should be okay. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, very good. Yeah, the aerospace company we were working with, they never share measure in terms of ROI. So what we can tell is actually the payback in terms of saving time and reducing the number of errors that we have at the shop floor. I give you some ideas, which is actually something that the company is sharing with us. Just to make an example, they spend a lot of time before the solution in actually propagating information from the engineering to the manufacturing, as I said before. And basically the reason was because they need to certify every kind of change they have at engineering. So whenever there is a new drawing, a new modification on the engineering, they need to go through a certification process, which was very, very hard to keep. Basically, they keep something like 1 week in order to have an information from PLM domain to the MOM domain. Then they decide, why should we certify every single change we have? Why don't we certify the way the information is actually sending from PLM to the MOM? So together with us, we decide to certify the bridge, which is delivering information from engineering to the MES. And actually, this allows them to have the information available almost real time. And this is a very important saving in terms of time, of course, because they also give the possibility not to cluster the engineering information in order to then send it to the manufacturing, but to send the engineering information while they will be produced. Another measure which is actually very important, which is not really related to the link between the PLM and the MOM, is on the MES level. They used to say that they spent the same time to produce than the time they needed to collect the information. So basically, every time an operator is performing an operation, is actually doing an operation, then they need to spend the same time in order to store the information which is related to this operation. With the MES in place, the as-built information, which is basically collecting all manufacturing information, is available automatically, is available at real time. And so they basically save a lot of time in order to record the information, which is actually mandatory from the aerospace company. Moreover, we don't need it, as it was before, to store information at the end, and then they print what they call the batch record. This information is available as building, so while they are producing, and immediately having the possibility to identify deviation for what has been planned. So there is an automatically compare between what is as planned at engineering with what has building at manufacturing. So these are, I think, two factors, which is maybe not a clear measure, but it's immediately easy to understand how they can save in terms of time, in terms of reducing the errors.
All right, thank you, Piero. And it looks like we've got our technical glitch fixed. So we're going to go back a few slides and give Scott a chance to tell his story. So we're going to go back a couple of slides here to Scott. And again, our apologies for the technical glitch there and losing Scott, but this is Scott Daugherty. He is the Senior VP of Business Development at Cormetech. And Scott, let's hear your story.
Great. I wanted to make sure everybody can hear me now.
Yep, you're good. All good. Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Okay. Cormetech is an air pollution control company that makes catalysts for controlling emissions on power generation companies around the world. And several years ago, we decided to take what was a kind of a manual data process on our manufacturing floor to try to improve data accuracy and troubleshooting and overall manufacturing management. So we we installed an MES, and if you'll go to the next slide, we went through a process that we use really for justifying a project. In this case, it happened to be an MES, and it's a combination of continuous improvement on a team-based environment. It also adds some aspects of Six Sigma Green Belt from a lean manufacturing approach, and then also, if you've seen things on change management, really from the Cotter change management, we combine those into our approach on how to justify a project and how to ensure success. And so the next slide, please. So for this project for us, we looked at some measures of success, which was part of those 8 steps that are detailed in the presentation. But we tied our operational metrics of material utilization, which is a key driver for us, and our associate labor productivity as key drivers for the financial part of this. And then there were some other measures that we had for this project, which we tried to get very specific on at the beginning of the project. We wanted to have a clear line of sight to quick look at our work in process, our scheduling of the line, decreased our process cycle time from the time we initiated a batch till we completed a catalyst module, improve our data quality, so we're only entering things one time and using that through the entire system. The other big financial payout for us was on error proofing, using kind of a barcoding system to ensure we were using the right material and right tooling and things like that really improved our quality. And then we had 2 other goals as part of this to ensure we had integration capability into our ERP system, which we do, and then we wanted to make sure it was scalable so that it was something that we could continue to grow on, and we're continuing to do that. So those were our goals. Those were our specific kind of must-haves, and we had that all as part of our charter. So if you go to the next slide, the returns that we got, and I give a little more detail and can give other detail if you'd like on how we measured the success of this. One, everybody looks at return on investment, and that's really just taking what you spend on it versus what you get in return, and then doing the ratio of that to get what's your percentage return on investment. It measures the profitability, and it's also a good way to help you make decisions when you're starting a project to determine which project's going to have a highest return on investment. The payback period is really taking the money that you spend and how long it takes you really to get back to a break-even standpoint. For us in this project, it was 2.7 years. That's actually longer. And we knew that going in, but from a strategic standpoint, it was important to us to have this. We prefer to have somewhere in the 18 months to 2 years payback, if preferable, even less than that. But it still was reasonable payback on the investment. And then there's an internal rate of return, which is there's an Excel formula that will do that for you, and it really tells you what percentage rate you're getting on that investment, and it's a good way to compare projects against each other. So those are some of the measures that we had, knowing that we had operational metrics that we could measure time to financial performance. So in summary, on the last slide of this story, the keys to both justifying a project and then also getting the return on investment, I think, and it's detailed in the story, but you want to have a charter that you are very specific on what you're trying to solve. You obviously need to get the senior management buy-in early as part of the charter, so you have a clear kind of mission. You got to get the right people on the team, the proper resource. scope control and trying to phase out the project so you only go after what you can deliver, and try to do that in as quick a manner as possible, because the quicker you can deliver and gain credibility, the easier it is to expand and go forward. That's in at least in my practice. And then making sure you have operational metrics that are real, that tie somehow to financial performance, it makes it obviously much easier to determine ROI and payback and IRR and things like that. So that's kind of the story, and we've been successful with that MES. Our plan has changed over time, and we're still modifying and the scalability part of that, and still have work to do, but it's how we run our operation. Okay, thanks.
All right, hey, thanks, Scott. We appreciate it. So let's get back into some of the questions. The question that I was asking everybody was all about ROI, and I think we got some good answers there from Scott, but I wanted to give Mike James here a chance to go into more details on ROI. Again, what kind of ROI did you see, Mike? But more than that, how exactly did you achieve that ROI?
Okay, John, thank you very much. And there were certainly impressive numbers from Scott there. If Megan could bring up the Carlsberg slide again, then I can talk over it. But there are different phases in the ROI question, and one of them, of course, is before the project starts, and the level of investment which is going to be made, and how do we expect to achieve it? Because as Scott pointed out, we have to justify the expenditure. So in this particular project, we took an unusual step in that we looked at the total manufacturing costs, and we reversed the question as to what would be the level of savings that we would require to recover the investment that would have to be made, and secondly to make a decent return on investment. We looked at a very detailed analysis of where the savings could be made, but we were also aware that savings, for instance, or benefits that would come from increasing sales would probably have a larger financial impact than just chipping away at the costs of running the different breweries. So I have to be very honest. I think that Carlsberg made, to some extent, a leap of faith. They looked at the numbers and decided that yes, it would be possible to get a very good return on investment, and they moved on it. And what also happened through the project was what we call increasing insight. As you begin to gather more data about the process, bring the process under control, make sure that the compliance to the process is being adhered to, and that quality checks are being completed, you begin to understand more and more. And together with Carlsberg, we began to identify an increasing number of opportunities. So let me just give you an example. In this market, I mentioned earlier that it's important to respond very quickly to demand. But we found one of the interesting situations here was that the planners that were working in the plant are only working at, let's say 9 to 5. They were working a 40-hour week. They're there from Monday to Friday. You think about that, these breweries are running 168 hours a week, but the planners are only there for 40 hours. And what's actually happening is demand is changing so quickly that the operators on the line deciding which type of packaging to fill with the beer which is available are basing it upon a plan, for instance, on a Friday evening, which is very out of date by the time we get to Sunday evening. So we took the unusual step of providing the line fillers, the people on the line, the operators on the line, with the data that they needed. They could see the demand that was changing in the market and giving them the authority to fill to different types of orders and to be able to meet the demand that was coming from the market much quicker and more flexibly. It had a dual impact. It reduced the cost of planning because the level of planning required was much lower, and it increased the level of sales by 1.5%. The ROI issue is that you do have to put that money in first. It takes a while to get these systems deployed, and therefore you've invested all your money before you start to receive any money back. So it's generally with the breweries, it was taking up to 12 months to get the systems implemented before the benefit was received the following year. We've put the statistics in here, which are related to, for instance, 1.5% sales increase. We are talking here about returns on investments in the second year of the deployment that are getting well over the 200% mark. So very significant. But as I mentioned, I can talk about a lot of other benefits that flew out of this, but it is eventually the customer themselves, Carlsberg themselves, that derived the benefit, found the ways of working with the new information systems that they had available to them, giving the data to the right people to make the right decisions at the right time, quite transformed not only the business benefit that they were receiving, but also the way they were working and also their customer satisfaction. Now, I've still not found a way of measuring ROI on customer satisfaction. We just have to assume it's good, but it's hard to put a number on it. But yeah, good figures coming out of here. The solution that was chosen in this particular case was Semantic IT, you know, it fits in the level 3 of the pyramid, the information pyramid. So I can give you some answers. I can't give you all the answers, but you can see that the numbers are very positive. So it's a nice question to get, John. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. So Scott, I'd like to go back to you. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add specifically around this question of ROI and what the project did to actually achieve that ROI? Anything addition you'd like to add?
Yeah, I can just a couple points. I mean, the big ones for us were the material utilization and being able to get information much more quickly to our with our engineers for problem solving. Much quicker genealogy of the process and the materials that we were making for process control was from our manual system to when we got that data when we implemented the MES allowed us to improve the process and reduce defects. So that was one of the biggest paybacks and measurable paybacks that we had. Obviously, there was some labor savings with just doing things like paperwork and real-time labor productivity that we got on the line. And the third one that I mentioned, really error reduction of having checks and balances on our equipment and in the process to ensure we were doing the right thing. And again, with the check and balance, you know, preventing problems and really preventing any errors from happening, and just the reduction in that versus the past history was a savings we anticipated we would get, and we did. So those were all part of the financial savings.
All right, thank you, Scott. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit now and tie into ROI and get into this idea of business case, okay? And talk a little bit about, ask you guys some questions about what it took for you guys to actually build a business case. And I'd like to start with Piero. Sounds like your business case might have been especially challenging to migrate from a ERP-centric MES to a PLM-centric MES. Okay, how did you go about actually even building a business case for this project?
Okay, well, actually, we had a very nice help from an entity of the company which is called Competence Center. They decide to have this team called the Manufacturing Competence Center in order to basically clusterize all the information coming from different plants, because the solution they wanted to build was a solution to be shared with Now 17 probably is going to be much more than that all over the world. So with different kind of way of working, different way of actually resolving problems that they have at shop floor. So they decide to have this filter, which is collecting all information from all over the world and basically standardize information, and to deliver one single entity, which is the skeleton of the solution, which is the bill of process, to be shared with different plants. So the business case was actually to identify 4 domains, which is PLM, manufacturing operation management, ERP, and maintenance. And they decide to have everything clusterized in these 4 domains. So there is no actually the possibility of having another little component which is doing a specific feature. Everything has to be collected into the 4 domains. So with the help of the competence center, basically we were able to define one single way of producing based on a specific serial number. So now they have a solution running for different plants, which is basically installed in what they call an hub. They have actually 4 hubs geographically in the world, and any single hub is serving multiple plants. But there is only one instance of PLM, one instance of ERP, and one instance of manufacturing operation management. So there is no way of having a different way of working just because you are in a different country. So this was really, really challenging, especially for the company, because they have really to standardize. They need to have a standard operating procedure. So a problem which is found in Singapore will be treated the same way as it was in the UK, as it was in France. The way of producing a single serial number cannot be different from country to country. Of course, there are data which it could be different, and this is another challenge, which is basically having a data segregation. And this is again an important feature, because you need to have, for example, into the MES, the data segregated so that the physical plant can only see a subset of the data. So this was the challenge, and now the company has 17 plants running. They are rolling out for our other 5 plants. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Piero. So, Mike James, the same question. You again had some pretty impressive ROI, but what did you actually have to go through to put together the business case for the project?
Yeah, a lot of hoops, John. As I mentioned earlier, we were building up a picture to understand the full costs of running the breweries and looking for where the savings were going to be made. But I think it's incredibly difficult to make that judgment call. Will there be an increase in sales, etc.? So we also added a number of other factors to the business case. One example was the tying of the LIM system into the manufacturing execution system. So the laboratory information management system carries out a number of quality checks on the beer. In fact, there are more than 270 quality checks through the process. And as you say, it appears to be a simple product, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Of course, we have to be very careful with contamination. This is a product for human consumption, very nice human consumption, of course. But by tying the LIM system in, we could be absolutely sure that the quality checks have been completed before the beer was used on the filling lines. So not only are we looking at business related returns, money measurements, but also looking at security and compliance. Is the plant operating correctly? Is the brewery doing everything right to make sure that the consumer is using a product which is going to keep them safe? Now, from a board of directors point of view, this is also a business case. And I think that when we examine these types of projects, and also the way that the information can be then shared across the breweries and the best practices can be used, we start to tighten up the reasons for starting a deployment and then going ahead with it. So in my view, the business case is not just about money. It has other aspects to it. We're living in an increasingly compliant-driven world, and so we're seeing a lot of business cases being driven by compliance, food industry, in the life sciences industry with drug production, etc. And also, I think going back to Piero's case, as well in the aerospace industry, there is also a significant requirement for compliance so that these products are made safely. So just to add that, I think, to the mix, it's not just money, it's also about safety and compliance.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. So Scott, why don't you answer that question about what it took for you guys to put together a business case to get your project approved and off the ground?
Yeah, and similarly, what we really had to do, along with the internal justification of the project itself, we actually had, before we were able to get the project approved and justified, we had all the financial information, and we really had the project ready to go. And we had to step back and put together more of what I'll call a 5-year plan, or an IT strategy that we called it at that time, but to see how not only the MES worked in the individual plant, but how it would tie to our future kind of business intelligence. We did have a LIMS system in our laboratory, homegrown kind of CRM that we were using, as well as our ERP system, and then future improvements kind of at a larger scale level as to what we were going to do strategically as a company, and then how the MES fit into that. So that had to fit into the business case. And so we actually were delayed a little bit on the implementation of starting the MES, because we had to see how it fit into the larger picture and our longer term plan. And even though, as we said, the payback was 2.7 years and a little bit longer than we maybe wanted, we knew that for our manufacturing to improve and grow in the future, that it was the right thing to do. So strategically, it fit, even though the financial part of it may have been a little bit longer than we wanted.
All right, thanks, Scott. So we've got a lot of different questions that are coming in from our audience right now, and I've got about 10 minutes at most left in our Q&A session. So if it's okay, guys, I'm just going to bounce around to a lot of different topics based on the questions that our audience is sending in. So the first one, Piero, there's got to be more kind of complexity associated with trying to do 17 plants in however many different countries this was. So regulatory, financial, currencies, unit of measures, time zones, all kinds of stuff like that. Can you elaborate on some of the other challenges you faced with the 17 plants?
Yes. So of course, if we start from the real definition of the product on the PLM, the Siemens Solution Team Center, of course, helps in order to have these completely independent of the country, independent of the unit of measure, independent of the regulatory. The real challenge is basically to have, as I said, the bill of process, which both contains the information which are standard information, so the one that the company wants to keep the standard all over the world, and to specify some specific features which are basically dedicated to a single plant or to a single region. this was really the challenge, but the team center is able to do so. And also, if we go to the plant, of course, also the capability of the plant may change. So again, there is the need to have to basically decouple which are the information which we want to keep standard. For example, the standard operating procedure in order to fix a specific issue, and then something which is specific on the plant. So how we are going to fix that, to solve this issue on that specific plant, because you have maybe different tools, you have different machines. But the solution, so the loop, which is from PLM to the MOM and back to the PLM, is able to do so. So to decouple the standard information with the specific one.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. So, Mike James, we have a question for you. So the question is, what if it's not a brewery? How would your solution apply to other industries, and could other industries benefit as much as Carlsberg did from your MES solution?
Well, yeah, the answer is of course, but every industry needs, its investigation. You're looking at an as-is situation, and we're looking for where we can find the benefits. I mean, our particular business covers a really wide range of businesses: automotive and aerospace, food and beverage, life sciences. I mean, but you have to take a look at it. For instance, we certainly used some of the lessons learned from Carlsberg at a number of applications, for instance, in meat processing, in coffee roasters, in potato starch applications in the dairy area. But yeah, surprisingly, the same MES system has also been deployed by us at aerospace and automotive companies. But it's a different business case. You have to look at it with care.
All right. Thanks, Mike. So, Scott, the question we have for you is, what's next for your project? Where does Cormetech go from here?
Yeah, so some of the things that we've done is just really expand in the plant side, the equipment and the products that we're making. So from a scalability standpoint, we were able to do that. We've tied in and are continuing to integrate the MES from the shop floor into our financial ERP. We did some of that initially, and we continue to link those. And then the other areas where we didn't necessarily from a phase one standpoint implement, but things like OEE for equipment effectiveness and some of our maintenance type PM type parts of the system are really kind of the next areas. The material and labor were our primary focus areas initially, and equipment and maintenance kind of are the next areas.
All right, that makes sense. So with just a few minutes left, guys, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to ask one question for each of you. Same question, give you about 90 seconds or so to answer it. If you wanted to leave the audience with one important thing that you learned here from your project that you want to pass on as being kind of the one thing that you want the audience to take away, what would it be? Piero, you're up.
Yes, I'm going to tell you what the project manager of this project said to me, the project manager from the company side. He said, which is the value in having a perfect PLM if you are not able to manufacture what has been engineered? So basically, this is we need to keep the PLM domain and the manufacturing operation domain together. So because if you keep it separated, you may have a perfect PLM, but then you are not able to actually manufacture what has been engineered. So PLM and MOM has to be together.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mike James.
John, there's really only one answer, and that is that Carlsberg is probably the best beer in the world. I think that the fact that they announced this project to their shareholders and the benefits that was bringing them speaks for itself. So just enjoy a pint or a liter or whatever it is you're drinking of a beer tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate that. Scott.
Yeah, I guess I would go back to from a project standpoint. There was a lot of steps involved in that, but for me, and whether it's an MES project or really any project that you're working on, the chartering phase of the project is extremely important. And to me, we've seen projects either be successful or fail based on how the project was laid out, how specific the team was in what they were trying to accomplish. And in my experience, you can get that. There's some detail in the presentation, but about a charter and how you put that together to manage what the expectations are and what you're going to do in a project. If you follow that pretty specifically, manage the scope, so to speak, you can really increase the likelihood of success of a project, both getting it justified and delivering on the ROI. So the chartering part of that, I think, to me, is one of the most important parts of the project.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. Well, I think we're going to wrap up our Q&A session, guys. And I just want to say to all three of you gentlemen, to Piero, to Mike, and to Scott, thank you very much. Congratulations on your successful projects. Congratulations on your successful stories that you presented today. Thank you very much for being part of our presentation and being part of MESA's Smart Stories program. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike to say just a couple words about MESA and mention our sponsors one more time and wrap us up. Mike Yost.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, John. Appreciate it, all of our panelists and all of our contributors. So as we mentioned earlier, there were 30 submissions this year. That's up from last year, and it's just the starting point for what we can do next year. MESA is a global community, and the more we contribute together, the more that we have these kind of conversations, the more that people that have been through these types of projects share with each other, the more we can move together more quickly as an industry or industries. So this is really critical. It's really important that we do this. And so to reiterate what John said, really thank everybody who did that. Really thank everybody who went online, downloaded the articles, really, again, appreciate the work that everybody's putting in here. We especially want to thank the sponsors that are involved with us. So getting the word out, as you can see, we had a dozen sponsors this year that helped us get the word out there. And so that's a very critical part of what we do. So we encourage everybody to get involved, stay active, join MESA if you're not formally a member already, and certainly continue to be a part of what we're doing here, and look out for the next round of the Smart Stories Awards program. So thank you very much and have a great day.